I'm going to just be blunt with you guys. I've been waiting for today, for this time, because we have a lot to talk about. I'll be honest with you. I have never been this more excited for an episode than I have been in how many months have we been doing this? February, January, December, November. In the 5 months we've been doing this, oh, God, dog, it's almost been half a year. That's insane to me. But, guys, we have a lot to talk about today. And there's a lot. We got spring practice going on for the majority of college football around the college football world. It's definitely going to be an impact a lot that's going on in today. But it's not going to be a long episode today, guys. I have to go to work in about 45 minutes. So I'm literally just going to do a 45-minute show, and then I got to go at 6. But anyways, thank you all for tuning in once again to Inside the Huddle. I'm your host, as always, Lucas Hill. Make sure wherever you are watching our shows, everybody do us a favor. Make sure that you like, share, subscribe. If you're watching us on YouTube, make sure you turn on the bell notifications so that you are notified for every time we go live. If you're watching us on Instagram, if you're in the live chat right now, leave us a comment and give us your opinions on what you guys want to hear from us today. If you're watching us on our flagship station on X, make sure that you give us a like. Make sure you repost to all those social media groups, and make sure that you also give us a follow at Lucas_Hill23. Guys, I've been very excited for this one. Let me just tell you. So let's just dive right into this. We got a lot to talk about. Dabo Swinney talking about how canceling spring games won't stop the tampering that is going on in college football. More spring games that are being canceled around the college game. How is that affecting things? Free agency, it's affecting the NFL draft as we speak. Where does this affect Shedeur Sanders? Where does this affect many other top draft picks that a lot of mock drafts are changing right now? And some are even putting Shedeur Sanders as the third quarterback drafted in this year's draft class. Very, very interesting stuff to talk about today. But once again, ladies and gentlemen, thank you all for tuning in. So let's get this thing up and rolling. Dabo Swinney, according to our good friends over at On3, I printed this out last week. I was going to come on last week, but the internet was just messing with me. That's why we did do a lot of live shows the last, I'd say 2 or 3 weeks, last week or two. But yeah, man, it's been wild. Let me just tell you. So Dabo Swinney emphatic that canceling spring games will not stop the tampering. Amid a handful of spring game cancellations over tampering concerns, Clemson coach Dabo Swinney is making it abundantly clear that he's not worried about that. The Tigers will host a spring game, and Swinney will deal with whatever fallout that leads to. He sounded skeptical that hosting a spring game will more easily facilitate tampering anyway. We're going to have a spring game, and I hope we can have some type of fan day with it as well. I don't know. We'll see. Listen, whether you have a spring game or not, it's going to be tampering. Ain't nobody going to look at the spring game and go, oh, yeah, boy, they got PFF. That's called PFF. They've got everything on everybody already. They do, by the way. They got all these grades and stuff that they do. I mean, hey, that's what they do. Canceling the spring game ain't going to stop tampering. We're going to need a lot more help than that to stop tampering. And hopefully at some point that will happen. I agree. Dabo has been right. Dabo's been right about this. I don't understand the point of canceling the spring game because of tampering. Really, I don't think they want to do a spring game anymore because they're afraid of this tampering BS, which I think is total baloney. Because tampering is going to happen. Whether you like it or not, unless something changes in the NCAA, which we've told you is probably going to get canceled within the next 5, maybe 10 years. At least 5 years, it's going to be canceled. But tampering is going to be around for a while. We've said this time and time again on this show. The NCAA dug themselves into a hole when they allowed for NIL to come into play. And they have nobody to blame but themselves. So whether or not you like it or not, the fan base doesn't really like it at some points because they don't want their favorite player getting swayed away by the money to go to some other program. But that's the reality of college football. That's the reality of the business of the game right now, especially when we're treating players like they're at 14, 15, high school kids, early as 13 or 14 years old. We're giving these kids 6-7-figure contracts worth of NIL money. And by the way, they're still getting paid under the table. You think I'm crazy? I promise you. They're getting paid under the table. Whether you want to say that or not, I know plenty of guys. I'm not going to name drop, but I'm telling you, I know plenty of young men and women that are still getting paid under the table with NIL. It's not a lot, but still, it's to help with your meal plans. It's to help with your swipes that you get into the dining room hall. It's for all of that, guys. Whether you like it or not, that is the absolute truth that the NFL has, that college football has at this point in time. So it's not on. It's basically on the higher ups to change something, guys. Whether you like it or not, that is the truth about what's going on in college football right now. But again, here's the thing. Dabo Swinney outlined that though they'll have a spring game, some players may not participate, which I think is kind of BS. That's just the nature of having a roster with some veterans on it. Okay, well, that's kind of weird, but okay. Whatever. Does not matter to me. By the way, that's the shredder. I need to fire up the link, guys. Y'all need to remind me that I got to fire this thing up, bruh. All right. I'm about to fire up the link for you guys to hop on inside the huddle. All right. All right. Link's out there. Here we go. Anyways. So let's go ahead and move on real fast. Guys, I don't know if you've heard about this one or not, which I thought was fairly interesting. So according to Joseph Cook over at Inside Texas, part of the On3 family, yeah. Apparently, 2 Texas football players plus 3 others in the UT athletic department is part of self-reported wagering violations. According to a report from the Austin American-Statesman, is that 5 members of the UT athletic department is now including 2 unidentified football players committed NCAA violations to impermissible sports wagering between July 11th and November 4th of 2024. The other 3 athletic department members were a non-student athlete associated with women's tennis, a student assistant, and an uncategorized athletic department employee. Apparently the Statesman says that the 5 individuals placed almost $15,000 in wagers on Prize Picks NCAA rules prohibit daily sports wagering by anyone associated with an athletic program. In addition, any involved in an NCAA athletic department cannot place wagers on any sports the NCAA sponsors, which kind of, to me, honestly makes no sense. So you can wager on an NFL game, but you can't wager on a college game. That doesn't. I'm sorry, it just doesn't make sense, especially with sports gambling being legalized in almost every state in the United States. But anyways, a college football player cannot place wagers on professional women's bowling because the NCAA sponsors women's bowling. Okay. So, okay. The statesman reported that one of the players was ruled ineligible, reinstated, and required to pay the value of the winnings to a charity. The other player placed 67 wagers. Holy cow, you got a problem, bro. Including 2 on Texas basketball. He has since left college football, according to the statesman. The football team received additional sports wagering education as a result, according to the statesman. I'll be honest with you. If you're going to bet, just don't do it around athletic facilities. That's my thing, because you're going to put yourself in a deeper bind than where you already are. And it just doesn't seem to me you're deciding to do that anyway. I mean, it just doesn't make much sense to me that you're going to wager on your own team. It just doesn't make sense to me. But regardless, you got caught. Now you got to face the consequences, bro. That's all I can tell you. That is all I can really tell you. All right. Let's continue on. Let me ask you guys a question. Which program do you think is under the most pressure in 2025? Now, there's a lot that you could say. And it's hard to pinpoint which one is the most under pressured. But I'll be honest with you. It's easier to pretty much know which one it is. Overall, I would say it's hard to come up with an overall because there's so many teams that are under so much pressure. But I'll give you 4. I'll be honest with you. Actually, I'll do this because this just came to mind. We're going to take a break. I'll be right back, and we'll come up with our top.
Are you a music producer, DJ, or just someone who loves to remix tracks? Well, say goodbye to messy, low-quality track separations and hello to vocalbreaks.com, the most powerful AI-driven music editing tool on the market. Unlike other separation tools, Vocal Breaks harnesses the most advanced AI model available, delivering crystal clear vocals, pristine instrumentals, and an unmatched precision, all online with no software required. You can extract vocals or instrumentals with studio quality accuracy. It's perfect for remixes, mashups, karaoke, and music production, and for a faster, cleaner, and more reliable than any other service. So if you want the best, don't settle for less. Go on over to vocalbreaks.com and use code LucasHill10 now and experience the full future of AI-powered music editing. That's vocalbreaks.com using code LucasHill10.
Okay, so during the break, guys, I came up with 7 teams that I thought were under the most pressure in 2025. And some of you may disagree with me. I've got one that is kind of out there, but hear me out on that one. Trust me, you're going to want to listen. Okay, so let's start off with the obvious one. Number 1 to me is Auburn. For context, guys, let me just read you the guys that they got not just through the portal, but also from recruiting as well. Just some notable ones that I noticed. The quarterback position is unbelievable with what you have. You get Ashton Daniels, who is a capable backup and a former Stanford quarterback. Everybody knows about Jackson Arnold from Oklahoma and the potential that he has with this Hugh Freeze offense. Not only that, you get Deuce Knight. Everybody know the 5-star quarterback from George County High School out in Mississippi. The guy has a lot of potential. I do think that they'll redshirt Knight. I don't know if he'll see playing time. They'll give him a bit of garbage time, but I do think they're going to give him this one to redshirt just with the amount of depth they have. But anything could happen at this point. And if he does take over in his freshman year, I do expect him to have a breakout year. And I think that with a guy like Deuce Knight, you're going to have a lot of opportunities with him. But let me just tell you about the rest of this team. You bring in Malik Autry, the 6'5.5", 325-pound defensive lineman, top 50 player in the nation, number 7 overall defensive lineman, number 2 player in the state of Alabama. You bring in Jared Smith, 6'6", 235, number 5 edge rusher in the nation. Anquan Fegans, number 78 player, number 8 safety in the nation. You got 2 top 10 safeties in this class, by the way. And Eric Winters, who's a top 100 player. In the state of Alabama, you've managed to grab the top 5 players. Deuce Knight, or no, not Deuce Knight. He's from Mississippi. In the state of Alabama, you've managed to grab Malik Autry, Jared Smith, Anquan Fegans, Eric Winters. 5 of the top 8. Not to mention Derek Smith, who's an unbelievable athlete. Caleb Falk from Highland Home, Alabama. And look, if Scout were here, he could probably give you a better understanding of this. He probably has seen Antonio Coleman, a top 200 player, top 20 defensive lineman from Saraland. Absolute monster at defensive line. But that's pretty much it when it comes to the defensive, or when it comes to the recruiting side of it through the high school level. When you look at the portal, you got Jackson Arnold, arguably a $2 million NIL guy. We already talked about him. Not only that, you're bringing in Tanner Bailey, who's probably going to be your third stringer. Knight's probably going to end up being, or actually, I think Tanner Bailey and Ashton Starks are going to battle for that number 2 position. Or excuse me, Ashton Daniels. You bring in Xavier Atkins, who is going to be, they have him listed as a linebacker, but I think he can play more of that safety role. I think he brings a lot of impressive things. He was a top 20 quarterback going into this year and was a freshman of the year whenever he was at Vanderbilt. So, ended up basically transferring out to LSU until he transferred out to Auburn. I don't know where they're going to have him at, to be honest. I think he'd be a pretty decent athlete. He played both sides, I'll tell you that. But anyways, regardless of that, I think this is a team that, if you look overall, you bring a lot of depth at the offensive line position. Majority of your starters at back. Plus, you added a guy like Xavier Chaplin from Virginia Tech. He's an unbelievable monster out at left tackle. You're talking about you bringing in Preston Howard, who can fill that role that I think Arliss Boardingham left out at tight end. At least I think that's what it was. But I think the biggest one is Eric Singleton Jr. That is just going to be a monster out at receiver. Him and Cam Coleman are going to be the best duo in college football if you have a decent performance from a guy like Jackson Arnold. One of the biggest things that has hurt Auburn recently has been their inability to get consistent play from the quarterback ever since the Hugh Freeze era began in 2023. You dealt with Peyton Thorne for 2 years, and you got nothing out of it. You just haven't had any sort of success. You haven't had a decent quarterback probably since Bo Nix left. That is my utmost opinion. You have not had anything going on for you ever since Bo Nix left for Oregon. And you're talking about a team that had, at one point, Mike Bobo in your backfield, who ended up going back to Georgia. You end up with Philip Montgomery. Now he's over at Virginia Tech. Now you bring in Derek Nix as your OC. What are expectations for Derek Nix at this point in time? You're talking about a guy that has been with Ole Miss for 15 years. It's his first time in a coordinator role in his career. I'm not sure of what to really think, but he has experience with Hugh Freeze, was a long time running backs coach with him before he got elevated to receivers and was an assistant head coach. So what is he going to do at this point in time? Do you have the trust in Derek Nix to be able to perform for you at a high level? I don't know yet. Because this year, to me, is a show me season for Auburn. I look on the stat sheet and I look at what you bring in and I say, oh my gosh, that's an impressive lineup. And people are having them as a top 15 team in the preseason. I'm like, okay, cool. To me, you're unranked to start the season. I think most fans are getting in way over their head if they think they're a top 15 team. And from the overall reaction of what I've heard, they're not thinking that. They think, oh, you're stupid. There's no way you're a top 15 team. I would agree with them. You're not. You're not even a top 25 program at this point in time. But it could be one of those seasons where I was listening to Ari and Andy the other day. And I got their opinion on Auburn. And they said that Auburn plateaus a little bit, especially when it comes to mediocrity. And then all of a sudden they rise. All of a sudden they just become really freaking good near the end of all of a sudden they just become really freaking good where they win 10 games, they make an SEC title, and they contend for a CFP every like 4 to 5 years. Is this one of those years? I don't know, guys. It's a show me season for Auburn. That's going to set the expectation of what to announce, what to look forward to in 2026. And look, Hugh Freeze has gotten a lot of hate ever since he's been at Auburn. Now, he's entering the halfway point of his contract. So what do you do at this point? It's a tough ask. Let me just tell you, because it's one where you have to be real about where this team is at this current time. They're in a show me. It's in a show me, don't tell me phase for Auburn. And I think a lot of the fan base believes that as well. Going to another one that I think is fairly obvious. That's USC. USC, to me, has a lot that they need to improve on. This, to me, is Lincoln Riley's big-time year. This has to be a season where if you don't put together a good season, if you don't win 8 or 9 games this year, you're screwed. You are absolutely screwed. Your defense performed better than expected last year. but your offense just did not show up in big games. You turned the football over a lot, which has been a widely used criticism of Lincoln Riley. Now you bring in a new offensive coordinator in Luke Heward. I think that's what his name is. Now, if you know the Heward family has been really well known around the Pac-12 / Big Ten. Is what they're now in. If you remember, his brother Brock was a former offensive, former All-American great over at Washington. Now he's at Fox as an analyst right now. So a little bit about him. Former offensive coordinator at Georgia State. When you've had guys like Ronnie Bell and Nick Arbuckle, who set numerous school records, was an analyst at Texas A&M for a little while. Then was an analyst in February of 22. Then was an interim wide receivers coach for a while. And then last year was the quarterbacks coach. Now this is his year. So what do you expect from a guy like that? What are you supposed to think about Lincoln Riley? Because I'll be honest, I don't know. I don't really know what to think about him at this current moment. You look at the start they had last year, and you'd have thought that a guy like Miller Moss was going to win the Heisman Trophy. And then it just all fell apart. You had so many games where your offense just let you down. Penn State is a great example. Maryland's a great example. Minnesota. Washington. Notre Dame. I don't know about Michigan because that Michigan defense really tore them up. Most of the time, it was just self-inflicted wounds that really hurt you at the end of the day. So now Luke Heward is coming into play. Josh Henson is now at Purdue. So do you think Lincoln Riley is going to relinquish him play calling? I don't know. Probably not. So there's a safety net for him at this point in time. $90 million is basically pretty huge for him. He's got a $90 million contract. If you don't improve, which, by the way, if you haven't noticed with USC in the past 3 years, if you've been living under a rock, guys, this team has been in decline ever since Caleb Williams, ever since they blew an opportunity in 2022 to go to the college football playoff. Remember that? That was whenever you had arguably one of the best offenses in recent memory. You know, you talk about when you brought in Jordan Addison and the season that he ended up having, won the Biletnikoff in 21 and just tears it up the same year. Talk about Brennan Rice whenever he was there. It seems like ever since December 2nd of 2022, they have been on a steady decline back to mediocrity like they were in the mid-2010s. Or I should say early to mid-2010s. So what else do you need to see at this point in time? So after that, ever since December 2nd of 2022, USC is 15-13 in that span. This is a pretty pivotal year. You've got the number one class in the class of 25. I understand that. You won a bowl game last year. I understand that. What are you going to do in the Big Ten? You knew realignment wasn't going to be easy. So what are you going to do? Are you going to be able to perform at a high level? This still isn't an easy schedule. You go to Memorial Stadium and go play Illinois, who is loaded on defense. You go to Purdue with a brand new head coach and a brand new offensive mind. We'll see what they do with their offense. I don't know if it's going to be a perfect year for them. You play Michigan State with year 2 of the Jonathan Smith era. I don't know what to expect from them. You play Michigan, you go to Notre Dame, you go to Nebraska, you go to Oregon, and then you have UCLA. If you don't win 8 or 9 games at the end of the year, I think Lincoln Riley, either he may be fired at the end of this year, or he'll be fired at the end of 26. If things don't change for USC, I don't think they fire him this year because of what they have in recruiting. But I promise you, if things don't change soon, it's over with for Lincoln Riley. Continuing on, LSU is under a lot of pressure. 3 years of the Brian Kelly era. And through those 3 years, this is what you've had so far. 22, you win 10 games, you make the SEC title, you lose to that great Georgia team. Understandable. Totally understandable. Next year, Jaden Daniels wins the Heisman Trophy, second greatest LSU offense of all time, but you have the worst defense ever. You fire Matt House, who was absolutely horrible. And then you look at 2024. And you never could find consistency. The interior of the defensive line was not very good. You brought in Bo Davis, who brought a difference. You brought in Blake Baker, made a huge difference to this defense. Got them to a pretty decent level. I think they could take a step up in 2025. You started off the year 6-1 after losing to USC, a game that you really should not have lost. But starting in the middle, you started to see little cracks until you got to Texas A&M. You collapse in the second half, and you blow a 10-point lead against Texas A&M. Against Alabama, you let Jalen Milroe run all over you. Get blown out in Tiger Stadium. Against Florida, you gave up a lot of big plays, and your offensive line broke down. Offensive line was an issue last year. I'll just be straight up with you. And you went 9-4. So now you're going into year 4. And you look at the schedule, and you look at who's returning. You brought in the number 1 portal class this year, at least according to some sources. You brought in a top 10 recruiting class. The interior of the defensive line is still an issue that I don't think you've addressed yet. But this is what you're looking at. At Clemson, you play Florida at home. You go to Oxford. You play South Carolina at home, who, by the way, still has 2 of the top 50 players in the country right now in Dylan Stewart and Lenora Sellers. You go to Vanderbilt, still with Diego Pavia. You play Texas A&M at home, at Alabama, and then you can say Arkansas and at Oklahoma would be a test, but I don't really see that one coming to either fruition. I don't think that'll even happen, but you have to think, how much longer are LSU fans going to accept 8-5 and 9-4 seasons? They're lucky that Notre Dame managed to lose the national title, or else things would get even worse for Brian Kelly and company. Now there'd be an extended pressure to win now after what his predecessor did. But you start to think that there's a lot more pressure than what people are looking at LSU. Is the opportunity that they have in front of them. Sure, you have a great portal class. Can you develop them? There's a lot of questions that Brian Kelly has to answer in 2025. And if they don't get them answered now, it's going to be a long time before LSU fans are going to be able to see another 10-win season if you're not going to get inconsistency. And it starts in the trenches. You have to develop there. I don't know what Kyle Williams is going to do this year. I got to watch him whenever he was a defensive coordinator at Ruston in the state championship, where My alum beat them pretty badly too. But anyways, that's besides the point. I don't know what he's going to do. I think when you bring in an experienced guy that has a lot of tradition at LSU, one of the best interior defensive linemen that has come through Baton Rouge. But again, the defensive line is going to have to continue to improve in 2025. If you can limit the big plays that you gave up a lot last year, and if you can find some consistency on the offensive line, you will be just fine. And I think it shouldn't be any doubt that you should be another 10-win team this year. And especially with an expanded playoff, the pressure is ramped up even higher for LSU. Penn State is another one. Now with Penn State, I mean, there's so much that we can talk about with them. The core three is back. With Nick Singleton, Katron Allen, and Drew Allar. This is bothering me, by the way. Okay. My apologies, ladies and gentlemen. But, again, hear me out. With Penn State, there's a big issue with them. And it had to come from offensive consistency. You just never saw a game last year where Drew Allar proved why he was supposedly one of the best quarterbacks in the Big Ten. You have to think this year is a big step up, especially when you consider what they've gotten through the portal this year. You finally were able to get some depth at receiver. And I think you would have to say that if things don't change, I mean, I think we're going to find out where Penn State's ceiling is this year, especially with what you have. Your secondary is going to take a hit this year. You're going to lose some stars there. But overall, I would say that you're still a playoff team. But again, if you end up back where you were with being back in the national back in the in the same position where you were in 2024, there's nothing really that you can do to change. You found out where your ceiling is for the next several years. Sorry, that is just where you are at this point in time. Whether you like it or not, this is where this team is at. So this is a pivotal year for James Franklin and company. I'm not saying he's getting fired. That is the last thing I'm thinking about. But things have to change. If you are not even in the national title, if you're going to get bounced out in the semifinals like you did this year and miss out on another opportunity, you know that the fans have been waiting for this moment for a while. But you found your ceiling. You have found your ceiling. Alabama. Year one of the Kalen DeBoer era went off not as great as what people would expect. But your offense was a big limiting factor. I'm not saying this was all Jalen Milroe's fault. Believe me, I'm not. But here's the thing. Your offense basically did nothing for you to help last year following that Georgia game. It was not fun, especially going up against top-tier defenses. Yes, I know you put up 500 yards against Georgia. But where was the consistency at? Offensive consistency was a big problem for Alabama last year. If you can't find it this year, you're going to end up putting yourself in a bind in 2025. If things don't get better, then I think this is what you're going to expect with Kalen DeBoer. But you have to be honest with yourself. This should be an improving team. I still think this is a top 10 team. My issue is the quarterback position. Is it going to be Keelan Russell? Is it going to be Ty Simpson? All likelihood, it's going to be Ty, who's going to take the first snap when we talked with Jackson Johnson earlier, I think last month. That is what he gave us the impression of. Will it happen at this point in time? I am not sure. If it does, great. If it doesn't, Oh, well. But bottom line is this, guys. If you see no improvement in the offense, you're going to see a lot of fans get really upset in the near future. All right. Miami is going to be the final one, by the way. I was thinking about putting Texas Tech up there, but then I'm looking at them and I'm thinking, I don't think there's any pressure for Joey McGuire and company, knowing where they were the last several years. So that's just not fair for them. So I'm going to be honest and just say they're not really under that much pressure. But I will say, with the portal class they got this year, they were the number one portal class according to On3. They did a great job in recruiting, and the type of coaching staff they have, expectations should be pretty high. And I would say that they're under a pretty good bit of pressure, but I wouldn't say that they're under the most pressure. But Miami, on the other hand, is under a lot of pressure. Mario Cristobal, has to be his money year. Mario Cristobal, year after year, has choked near the end of the season. You saw it last year. You saw it a lot at Oregon. And there's just no way that you could really say about a team like that and say, man, you think there's a lot of what if with Miami. And I'm tired of the what if. Why can't you just be consistent? How is your defense going to do this year? You fire Lance Guidry, and now you bring in a guy from Minnesota, which, by the way, I love Corey Heatherman. I've been following Corey Heatherman ever since he was with Kurt Cignetti at JMU. And, dude, he's a great defensive mind. I really, really respect what he has. By the way, I want to give a quick shout out to our good friends Kingdom Sports in the chat. They're doing a great job with their show. Appreciate you guys for tuning in. But Corey Heatherman is a guy that I think has been waiting for a Division I job. Remember, 4 years ago at JMU was AFCA Assistant Coach of the Year as a DC. Now he got his first shot with a P4 program last year with Minnesota. Did a great job with that Golden Gopher defense. I think they were a top 50 defense overall. Now you got ahead a Miami team that's basically going to be in rebuild on the defensive side of the ball. So what are you going to do overall with this team? What are you going to do overall with what Miami has to offer on the defensive side of the ball? Because you lost a lot of pieces. Now you built through the portal and through recruiting. And I'll say, you've gotten some pretty critical pieces on your staff as well. You got Damian Lewis, who has a lot of Miami ties, was a former Miami defensive lineman. He's going to be the defensive tackles coach this year. I think he's a great addition to them. You talked about so much that Miami is going to bring together. But bottom line is this. You brought in Carson Beck. You brought in C.J. Daniels. Now what are you going to put out on the field? Yes, your offense is going to take a little bit of a step back. They're not going to have Cam Ward numbers. But can your defense be better than what it was to really vault Miami over the top and over that hump that they've been trying to get over ever since, I would say, even 2017? They've been trying to get over that hump and be a consistent force in college football like they were 10, 20 years ago. Can you finally do that? 2025 is a difference maker. It's going to make or break Mario Cristobal's legacy, especially as a head coach. So that's going to be it for us today. I got to get to work. I'm not going to lie to you guys. But thank you guys all for tuning in. Do appreciate you all for hopping on Inside the Huddle. Had 20 of you hop on in. Appreciate the love. Appreciate the support. Thank you guys once again. Y'all have a great rest of the day, and we'll see you when we'll see y'all hopefully by Monday or something like that. If not,